Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for joining me on another edition of Extreme Health Radio. And by now, you probably realize there's no intro music, and I apologize for that. We're having some soundboard issues here, but we are going to plod on anyway and do the show. So we are really excited to have Jeanice Barcelo on our show today. And this is episode number 62 of Extreme Health Radio. So you can check it out at extremehealthradio.com/62. And on that show page, you'll find the transcription, the show notes, and all of the other reference materials that the guest mentions. And for reference, this is Wednesday, February 12th, 2013. And I want to thank Mike Adams of Natural News Radio for having us on his website and on his network. It's really a blessing to be on there. If you want to follow us on Facebook, please feel free to do that. extremehealthradio.com/Facebook. We'd love to have you join our community. And we are broadcasting worldwide from sunny Southern California. It's a great day here. We're really excited. It's going to be a great day. It's going to be a great interview. So it's going to be really, really fun to speak with Jeanice. If you have any questions for our guest, you can send them to me, Justin at extremehealthradio.com, or you could call our voicemail, hotmail line, which is 949-391-7363. And I would love to play your message to our guest on the air. And this show, I want to let you know, is brought to you by Amazon.com. If you want to support our work, we would greatly appreciate that. You can just go to extremehealthradio.com/Amazon anytime you make a purchase there, and we'll get a little commission for your order. That will help support our work. So we'd be greatly appreciative of that if you'd like to do so. And before I introduce Jeanice Barcelo on the show today, I want to just tell you a little bit about our upcoming show schedule. On Friday, the 15th, we have Stephen Hura of One World Whey and Synergistic Nutrition, and he's going to be talking about some of this great protein powder that he has, some raw grass-fed whey protein powder, and we'll be talking about lots of other subjects as well. And then on Monday, we have Daniel Vitalis, and he's a wild guy. He'll be talking about rewilding and strategies for living a healthier life in our modern world. And then on Wednesday, February 20th, we've got Dr. Ed Group. I believe he runs the Global Healing Center, so that should be a great show as well. But today we have Jeanice Barcelo, and her website is birthofanewearth.com, and there's some really great information that's going to be shared today about birthing. And she's an independent child educator and doula, and she has a radio show herself, and you can find that on birthofanewearth.com. And she speaks about healing prenatal birth traumas and the birthing process and all that good stuff. So I want to thank you, Jeanice, for putting up with our soundboard issue here.
Hey, Justin, I'm delighted to be here, and it's no problem at all.
Well, thank you for joining us. It's going to be a good show. And so your website is birthofanewearth.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, my website is birthofanewearth.com, and the reason I chose that name is basically because I think that the main key to giving birth to a beautiful planet and to a beautiful species is to shift the way that we're conceiving and gestating and birthing our children. So if we really want to give birth to a human being that has all of their capacities intact, which our species clearly does not. Right now we're using a very small proportion of our brain potential, and an enormous amount of our DNA is dormant. Mm-hmm. Although scientists call it junk DNA, I just want to assure people that it is not junk. The Creator does not make mistakes. The stuff that they're calling junk is actually dormant, which means that a tremendous amount of our potential is dormant. And in large part, that is because of the overwhelming amount of trauma that we are experiencing as a result of the way that we're being conceived and gestated and birthed. And the birth situation in the United States in particular is critically dark. It's horrific.
It is,
what they are doing to babies and to mothers and fathers when parents are going into hospitals believing that hospitals are the safest place to give birth. I want to assure people that nothing could be further from the truth. The United States has one of the highest rates of infant mortality and maternal mortality in the developed world. I think we're rated like number 53.
Really?
Yes, that's how bad things are. We've got extremely small countries that are doing far better than we are in terms of protecting our children.
Isn't it interesting how we're just so led to believe that we have the best, hospital quality and the best, doctors and everything like that? We're so led to believe throughout our whole life that, America's the cutting edge of all this stuff, but really we're not, right?
Well, we are mind controlled. We are conditioned, and we'll go deep into this mind control information if we have time. We are conditioned to believe that technology and top quality, technocratically trained medical people will provide for us a healthy birth. And again, nothing could be further from the truth. Every piece of technology is interfering with the natural process of childbirth, and it's interfering with our capacity to be fully human. It is undermining our ability to express ourselves the way the Creator intended for us to be. So I want to remind people that hospital birth has been on the scene for less than 100 years, and human beings gave birth most of that time in nature, okay, not being surrounded by artificial walls, artificial fabrics, artificial everything, okay, that our species was totally, enmeshed with the natural world. And as we remove ourselves further and further from the natural world, and as we surround ourselves more deeply with artificial stuff, and especially technological interference with childbirth, the more decrepit we become. Okay, we're looking at a species right now that will destroy its host environment.
Right.
We're the only species that does that. We are the only species that knowingly and willfully will eat foods that we know are not good for us. Right. Okay, we know that if we're putting Roundup on our lawns, that is poison, and we do it anyway. Okay, and by the way, folks, Roundup is causing infertility in men. So if you're young and if you're planning to have children someday, you need to be shaken into awakenness to realize what you're doing.
Yeah, is Roundup that stuff that they spray on roots and?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny you said that, because just yesterday my wife and I were walking our dog, and there's a guy, like a city worker out there, and he was spraying this stuff, and he had a big old mask on, and my wife and I just walked completely on the other side of the street. But that's the stuff you're talking about, right? That
is the stuff I'm talking about. Now, people will end up, after the guy with the mask is there putting poison all over their lawn, then the guy with the mask is also going to put little yellow posters all over the lawn that says, "This is poison. Okay, your lawn is now poison. Don't walk on it." Okay, and people have cats, people have dogs, right, that are going to be running around in that poison lawn. And if there's little yellow posters in your lawn and it's poison, don't you think you'd want to snap out of it and say, why am I poisoning my environment? Why am I poisoning myself with the food that I eat? Why am I lining up to vaccinate my child and to vaccinate myself? What is wrong with my mind?
At some point we have to ask ourselves, how did we get here?
How did we get here? I'm going to explain how we got here.
Yeah, it's wild.
Because we have to jump out of it somehow, and part of shifting out of it means listening to people like me, because I want to warn people that the information I'm going to share today can be very disturbing and unsettling. But if we don't understand how we got into this situation that we're in, we are not going to be able to protect our children. And if we do go into a hospital to give birth, and I want to stress that 95% of hospital births are considered traumatic, and half of those are considered severely traumatic.
How are they considered traumatic? How did they come up with that determination? I mean, I would agree with that, but how did they come up with that determination?
The studies are done based on how mothers are reporting their experience of childbirth.
Wow.
Okay, and mothers are coming in with their babies. I wanted to finish that statement and to say that the trauma is causing families to break down. Okay, so you'll hear fathers sometimes say things like, I went to the hospital with my wife to give birth to my child, and I left without my wife. She's not my wife anymore. That's how traumatic the experience is. I've heard fathers say that when they are forced to walk out of that hospital after the baby is born, that they can't spend the precious hours and moments after the birth of their child with their child, that is the cruelest thing that they've ever experienced.
Yeah.
Okay, fathers are in pain, mothers are in pain, babies have been tortured seriously and quite literally, and we'll go into detail about that.
Yeah.
And families are breaking down because every single hospital birth protocol will undermine the capacity for human love to be experienced at birth. This is intentional. It's quite purposeful what they're doing. You know, I want people to understand that there's a larger picture here in which we find hospital birth. And that larger picture includes things like genetically modified foods, for example, that are altering the genetic expression of the human race and the genetic expression of all of life. Okay, we find our hospital birth in the larger picture of vaccinations that include aborted human fetal tissue. When you inject aborted human fetal tissue into the bloodstream of a human being, you are going to scramble the genetic expression of that human being. Okay, we find hospital birth in a larger picture of mercury in our dental fillings and fluoride in our drinking water. Okay, this is a big picture of deliberate attempts to alter the human race. And I want to remind people that Pfizer, creator of vaccines and one of the major companies that's also creating the protocols of hospital birth, owns Monsanto, all right, the creator of genetically modified foods and seeds.
Right. I heard about that recently, that they're the main owner of Monsanto, and that's amazing. So they're coming up with the actual protocols for the hospital birthing.
The same people that are creating pharmaceutical drugs, that are creating the whole medical industry, okay, there's people behind it all, right? They're the ones who are creating the protocols of hospital birth. They're the ones who are creating the scientists, which I'm going to say is not science. Well, science has a very strong satanic base, and that's more detail than I want to go into today. But what's posing as truth, okay, that these protocols, for example, are really beneficial and will produce a healthy child, is nonsense. I mean, do we really believe that if we inject an infant, a newly born infant, with a vaccination that contains aluminum, mercury, formaldehyde, MSG, aspartame, aborted human fetal tissue, monkey kidney, pig blood, bovine fetal serum, insect DNA, caterpillar eggs, okay? This is what's in vaccines. Do we really believe that when we inject a newborn infant with this toxic stuff, that's going to be good for the infant? Or when we inject a synthetic vitamin K, which is mandatory in some places.
Really?
Okay, when we inject synthetic vitamin K that the baby can't process, there's no way for the body to process synthetic vitamins.
Right.
Okay, it can't be done. And so how would this benefit the baby? How does it benefit the baby to put a bunch of burning poison in the baby's eyes, erythromycin ointment, okay, so that the skin all around the baby's eyes is all red? It's burning the baby's eyes. The baby cannot see. The baby cannot make eye contact with its mother or father, which is a key piece of the breakdown of human love. See, eye contact is a primary means by which the neurobiology of love will activate at birth. When a mother or father look in the eyes of their infant immediately after birth, a neurochemical process begins. It is a neurochemical process, a physiological process of love. And it is quite physiological because hormones, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, all of these beautiful hormones of love and well-being should flood the system at birth of the baby and the parents.
So why do they put the stuff in the eyes? Don't they say that it has to do with preventing blindness and things?
That is what they say that it has to do with.
Yeah.
There's no legitimacy to any of this. I want to just drive that point home. The human race has been giving birth for many, many thousands of years, and we are not blind. The overwhelming majority of us are not blind.
So what do they say? I guess they just say that there's some issue with, I guess it's like, I don't even know what they're thinking. I guess they just say that you would naturally become blind if you don't use this substance or something.
I got to tell you that whatever they say is nonsense.
Yeah.
Okay? There is not a threat that children are going to go blind if we don't put poison in their eyes. There is not a threat that children are going to get hepatitis B, for example, which is a venereal disease.
Yeah.
All right? The baby hasn't been sharing needles with anybody or having sex with anybody unless they're born into a satanic family. Okay? The baby is not going to have hepatitis B and does not need a vaccine. And the vaccine is causing extreme liver problems and jaundice, which is the basis for why so many children are born coming into the hospitals and having jaundice from the vaccine itself.
Wow, that's just wild. There's so many wild things. I want to get back to, so we started a little bit, talking about how you mentioned the birthing situation, the hospital's birthing situation is less than 100 years old. And then we're talking about how did we get here and all of this stuff. So the major protocols of the hospital birthing, did that start with the Rockefeller and their involvement with the allopathic medicine and all that?
Well, yeah, they are the creators of the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, they are the same people who are behind the protocols of hospital birth. They do not have good intentions for the human race. Their agenda is to make sure that we are a species that will be in service to them, and that all of the wealth that our species generates goes into their pockets. There's no joke. These people have zero redeeming qualities from my perspective, and their agenda is to alter our race, not to control our minds, to make us subservient, and to make us do things to ourselves that will hurt us, which we are doing en masse. It's unbelievable that there's people, flying in planes right now, spraying the skies with chemtrails.
Yeah, we see that all the time where we are, and I'm sure you see it where you are as well.
There's no question. It's across the planet right now, so there's got to be a large number of people who are willingly doing this, because when you're traumatized at birth, okay, it makes it very difficult for the human body to house the soul, okay, especially with things like vaccines. When you're injecting all these neurotoxic chemicals into the human body, then the body is not a vibrational match to house the soul. And so we have a condition right now that the human race are mostly biological robots. They think that they're thinking for themselves, but basically they're spitting out information. They have no clue where this information came from, who gave them the information. The TV says it's so it must be so. Look, it's in the newspapers, it's on the TV, right? It must be true. Yeah. Hospitals are safe. Yeah. Okay, but the same people who you just talked about, the Rockefellers, also own the media.
Right.
Yeah. These people have tentacles into every single institution in our reality right now.
And that's why I think, I forget what the statistic is, you may know, but with an average 20, 25-year-old woman has seen, I'm not sure how many depictions of hospital births, and the idea that birthing is really, really dangerous and it's really painful and excruciating. I don't even know how many they get bombarded with their entire life, and that's part of the reason why they think they need to go to a hospital, right?
Yes, that is part of the reason why they think they need to go to a hospital. It's also because they're born in hospitals themselves, and so they are pre-programmed to believe that hospitals are the place to give birth. And let me say that those pictures of hospital birth are often accurate. That hospital birth is extremely traumatic and painful. When you're born in a hospital and you've had a lot of trauma in your own birth that you don't remember consciously, but that your body remembers, okay, as soon as you walk into a hospital, your body is going to lock up in fear, because the body remembers. The body walks into the hospital and says, danger, danger. The reptilian brain is activated, okay, with signals saying danger, this place is not safe, not safe, not safe. And so the labor slows down. It becomes extremely hard to open up, relax, and let a baby come out. And I want to stress that fathers are also in extreme terror walking into a hospital, particularly fathers who are born in the United States and in Israel who have been subjected to circumcision. All right, circumcision is nothing less than ritual sexual torture of infants. It is done in 95% of cases without any anesthesia whatsoever, and infants are literally placed in a board. The board has a special little shape that fits an infant's body. Mm-hmm. So the infants are placed in this board. Their little arms are strapped down. Their legs are strapped down so that they cannot move. All right, you'll hear sounds from an infant, the likes of which you've never heard before, immediately, because they sense the evil that is about to be perpetuated against them.
Right.
Okay, somebody will come, a nurse or somebody will come and try to get the baby's penis erect in order to make it more easy to work with. Mm-hmm. And then the penis will be clamped, and for the next 5 to 7 to 10 minutes, however long it takes the sociopath that's doing this procedure, the next 5 to 10 minutes, they will be cutting off the most sensitive and sensually, important part of the infant boy's penis.
Wow.
And what happens to, this is heavy duty, heavy duty, what they're doing to boys. And what I was going to say is that the infant will often go into what's called parasympathetic shock, which means the nervous system has 3 choices when it's, exposed to extreme threat. Mm-hmm. Okay? You can either run, which an infant cannot do, especially because it's strapped down to a board, okay? Or you can, freeze, fight, right? The infant can't fight.
Right.
Because it's strapped down to a board, so he has to freeze, which means the nervous system is going to totally slow down to a place where nothing can be felt, and the infant is going to have to disassociate. So the spirit is going to leave the body in order for that infant to deal with the assault which is being inflicted upon him. Okay, and when that infant becomes an adult and walks into a hospital, immediately the men are going into parasympathetic shock, which means they are freezing. You can see this blank stare, all right, on some of the dads as they're walking into hospitals with their partners to try to support their partners in giving birth to their child, and they're in shock. Their bodies are totally reliving the trauma that they've experienced in birth, except their conscious mind doesn't have the capacity to process the information because it's that overwhelming.
Yeah, it becomes a part of the cellular memory, doesn't it?
Yes, it is cellular somatic memory. It's in the cells. It influences everything in our lives, even if we're not consciously remembering what's driving the dysfunction in our lives. But I was married to a man who was perpetually in parasympathetic shock. Every time he was presented with a situation of confrontation of any kind or something that he perceived as a threat, he would go into shock, unable to speak, unable to step up to the plate to protect and defend his partner.
Wow.
And here is a critical piece for men and women to understand, because when a father cannot protect his wife and his child during hospital birth, it creates a distrust in the mother. Okay, the mother will not be able to trust the father, that the father will be there to protect and defend her and her child. And here is a key to the breakdown of human love, even though none of this is conscious.
Yeah, and none of it's really talked about either. We have to take a short break, Jeanice Barcelo. She is at birthofannewearth.com if you are interested. And this is wild information, but I think it's really, really important that we understand these things moving forward so that we can give birth to a healthier generation of children. This is really, really key information, and it's a little heavier than normal, but very, very important, I believe. So, again, her website is birthofannewearth.com, and we are with Jeanice Barcelo, and we'll be right back after this break. So this morning when I was making my green smoothie, I was finishing up going through the Healthy Baby Code program by Chris Kresser, because my wife and I, Kate, are planning on having a child, and so we're doing a lot of detoxification and cleansing prior to conception. And this Healthy Baby Code, I was going through the final Q&A course or questionnaire that he had in audio format, and it's really, really good course. If you're looking to get pregnant or want to get pregnant, or if you're struggling with infertility issues, or if you have questions about how to have a home birth or a natural birth, these are all things that Chris Kresser covers in this Healthy Baby Code course. And you can check it out at extremehealthradio.com/babycode, or you could check it out in our store for more information. But it's really, really a great program, and I highly suggest any expecting mother to get this. He really lays it out how important having a healthy pregnancy is. It comes with 5.5 hours of video. It comes in audio as well. There's hundreds of pages of resources materials. There's ebooks and bonus files, and then meal plans and cheat sheets, so you can just basically follow along and take the right supplements and eat the right foods and avoid certain foods that he suggests. And it covers everything from autism to vaccinations to childhood diseases, how long to breastfeed, natural birthing principles, and all kinds of good stuff. And I really wish everyone would get a course like this before they get pregnant, because it's really, really cutting edge, and I feel like it's really going to help Kate and I have a healthier baby. So if you're interested in this, you can check it out at extremehealthradio.com/babycode, or you could check it out in our store. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's get back to this show. Okay, we are with Jeanice Barcelo of birthofanewearth.com, and thanks for joining us, Jeanice. And we were just going over some really, really kind of radical issues, and I think before the break we were talking about the circumcision issue, and golly, that's just amazing. It's so prevalent. I think that the United States is one of the only nations that still does it. Is that right, or still requires it?
Yeah, the United States and Israel are the two countries that are predominantly doing circumcision. Europe, most of the men have an intact penis. The United States, the majority of men do not. And it depends where you are in the United States. Some states have a very low circumcision rate. Some states are as low as 12%. Other states are as high as 85%. And so it depends on where you live. But the more, there's a huge intact movement right now in the United States, and an education that's happening regarding circumcision. It does have long-term effects on the boys that are becoming men, because they have been betrayed and violated in such a horrific way that it is to have healthy relationships and to trust, to be intimate with people. So a lot of this memory comes up during sex, and it causes men to check out, or to be imagining that they're, somewhere else while they're having sex, or with somebody else while they're having sex. And there's a lot of erectile dysfunction in our culture, and sexual problems, amongst couples. There's no question about that. That foreskin has particular qualities, okay? It has a particular texture and a particular what's the word I'm looking for? Function to when that foreskin meets with the body of a woman, the internal part of her vagina, it triggers a hormonal release in the men that allows the men to bond with the woman, to become protectors of the woman, to really experience the fullness of human love. And when that foreskin is removed, there's a much lesser ability to produce the neurochemicals of bonding and love. And the people, they could have, this is a religious tradition, okay? Religion is also a fundamental part of the mind control. The deity of the Bible commands that parents cut off their infant's foreskin in order to create a covenant with him. And I just want to invite people to consider, if their God requires them to do that, they might want to question the God that they're worshiping, because the real creator, who created the magnificence of the human body and who created the magnificence of the potential for human love, would not want you to cut off that potential. There's something else that wants you to cut off that potential, and that something is not loving, and that something is not God. It is not the creator.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even the hospital side of the argument, those people will say, well, the child will look different than other kids, in the locker room. I mean, talk about very, very weak arguments, don't you think? Extremely
weak arguments. Yeah. But the problem is that the men who've been circumcised are unconsciously reliving their trauma by inflicting it on their children. And this is the nature of trauma. People pass it on to their young, unless they have had the willingness and awareness to bring it into consciousness and to work with it and heal it so that it doesn't go down the line. Because with each generation it can escalate and get worse. And we have a serious situation on our planet right now. I think our species is having an extremely difficult time accessing authentic experiences of human love.
You know, it's interesting. You know, I think about, remember that book, what was it called, Brave New World, where basically everyone is turned into robots and, you know, treated as such. And, you know, I get this feeling that instead of understanding the body as an organism that has cellular memory, that can hold emotions in cellular memory and traumas that way, and instead of understanding that we're really like an ecosystem that's wrapped around an energy field, we treat the body almost like they do in that book, where we're all just robotic and we're almost like, you know, if you have something that needs to be taken out, like a spleen or a gallbladder or for circumcision, things like that, we're just robotic and we can just remove these parts like we're a car engine. But I think the whole paradigm is upside down, don't you think?
The whole paradigm is upside down, but the whole paradigm is a reflection of what the dark forces have desired for us to turn into.
Yeah.
And to be, and we have followed their plan. We have willingly, parents are handing their sons over for circumcision. And by the way, I want to make clear that circumcised men have a higher rate of HIV, because the people in the hospital are going to tell you it's going to prevent HIV, and it's just the opposite. It's just the opposite, so don't use that as an excuse, okay? If your son, or if your husband's penis has been mutilated and you and your husband now have a lack of ability to actually really deeply connect in human love the way the really Creator intended, don't do that to your child too. Don't pass that lineage on. Fathers need to get conscious.
I mean, the way I look at it is, if something like that were an issue for, you know, a couple of parents who were going to have children and they were going to have a boy, couldn't they just decide, if they really do want to go through with circumcision, couldn't they just decide that, you know, they could do that at a later date, like maybe when the kid's 10 or 12, or make it an issue for the child to decide rather than forcing it on a baby who's got no choice? I mean...
Absolutely. You know. This is my personal opinion, Justin. If it's not your penis, you don't make the decision. You don't own that baby's body. You don't own that baby's spirit.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
You have been entrusted with the care of this spirit. God's given that trust. And you can violate it by handing your baby over to be tortured.
Yeah.
But your baby's never going to trust you, not throughout your whole life, because your baby knows what you're capable of doing.
Yeah, and then they also lose trust in the mother too, don't they? Because
absolutely.
They take the baby away from the mother at that time.
Of course they take the baby away from the mother, and I want to stress that the body is a mechanism that the Creator gave to us in order to translate information, to, transmit light, transmit data, transmit info, and we receive. You can know more from 1 millisecond of feeling something than weeks and months of thinking about it. And so a mother who hears the cries of her infant son while he's having the most sensitive part of his penis cut off, if she was connected to her body, she would be feeling that she is now participating in one of the most evil rituals known to humankind. And she would grab her baby and run to protect her baby.
Is that the very first thing that they do in hospitals? Or, well, I guess it would be the clamping of the umbilical cord, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we're going to, oh, God.
that would be the first thing, wouldn't it?
The first thing is actually when they're doing fetal heart monitors. The first thing is in the womb when they're blasting these sound frequencies at babies through sonograms.
That's right.
The same kind of sound frequencies that are causing brain hemorrhages in whales and dolphins, that they're beaching themselves and dying all over the beach when the Navy blasts these sound frequencies. We're doing it to our babies in the womb and expecting them to come out neurologically intact. Doesn't work that way. They're going to be altered from the sonograms. Okay, and then we get to the birth process, and 1/3 of women, 1 out of 3 babies is now being induced, which means that they're being forced to come before they're ready. They're not fully developed. the medical profession is insisting that they're too big for their mother's womb or some bullshit. Excuse my mouth, it's total crap.
Right.
Okay? And so now we have to force them to come, and then we have to do a drug called Pitocin.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're going to do a drug called Pitocin, we first have to do an internal fetal heart monitor, which means we're literally going to screw this mechanism into the baby's skull while the baby's still in the womb. Somebody's going to stick their hand and their arm into the woman's laboring vagina in order to place the screwed-in probe into the baby's skull, in the very same spot, the soft spot, that would allow for that baby to be receiving a download of information from the spiritual realms as it's making its transition from one reality into another.
So really quick, going back to the sonograms, what do you think that they're doing? Are they screwing up the nervous system of the baby?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
they're screwing up the neurological development. They're causing trauma in the womb. They're causing the brain to be altered with those sound frequencies.
Are there any safe levels of getting a sonogram?
No.
Okay.
No, there are not. We are bombarded with sound frequencies, Justin. We are being harped.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have cell phone radiation being blasted at us. We have planes, trains, weed whackers, you name it, okay, in this technological world. All of these absurdly, clamorous, the roar and clamor of these sounds is activating our reptilian brain and keeping our reptilian brain in a constant state of threat or hypervigilance. And when the reptilian brain is activated in this way, all right, the limbic system, which allows for us to love and to bond with the other human beings, and the cortex, which allows for us to communicate with the divine mind, those parts of our brain cannot develop or function properly because the reptilian brain is overloaded with threat, and it is all around us.
And it puts us into a stress mode all the time, right?
Yes, a constant stress mode. When the reptilian brain is under threat, which it is 99.9% of the time in the technological world.
Because if you think about it, women never used to get sonograms. I mean, and plus, in my mind, if you're going to have a baby, I mean, what real point is it to have a sonogram when I know that for my wife and I, we're doing some cleansing right now to get prepared for this, and we're doing all this stuff now, and, having a sonogram, I don't know. It seems like a product of modern culture these days.
It is a product of modern culture. It is a reflection and a fundamental part of believing that technology is going to save us and is more powerful than God. People that are working this technology. I had a conversation with somebody who was doing a sonogram on my thyroid because I have a thyroid issue.
Mm-hmm.
And she really believes that what people are creating is more powerful than what God creates. People believe that the pills that they're taking, filled with chemicals that are toxic for the human body, are better and more powerful than the plants that the Creator created.
Right.
They believe this.
Yeah,
they believe that humans are more powerful than the Creator. They are so distorted.
And I think that just comes out in our culture in every way,
It does, and so we're handed over to technology.
Yeah.
Women's bodies are defective machines in this paradigm.
Right.
And the only way that women can give birth to a healthy child is if technology takes over, is if the medical demigods take over.
Yeah.
I can assure you, if you give your birth to these people, your child will be undermined, and so will the love in your family. There's no question about this. Let me say that screw in the baby's skull, okay, every time there's a contraction, that's going to pull and tug at the baby's skull. And some of these kids do not want their heads touched for decades after their birth because there's so much sensitivity in their skull from the probe. And these mothers are going to be given a drug called Pitocin.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Pitocin is artificial oxytocin. Now, natural oxytocin is the hormone of human love and of bonding. Okay, it's the hormone that's going to allow for the mother to love her baby and for the baby to experience the full activation of its brain potential so that baby can experience love during its life. Oxytocin is the hormone that makes for powerful contractions and that makes for the letdown of breast milk. It is a key hormone for the mother to love, bond with, and feed her baby. Okay, and for the family unit, when they're together during the birth, to experience the full-on capacity for human love. Okay, when you inject a birthing mother with artificial oxytocin, you are going to undermine her capacity to produce the real thing. And you are therefore going to undermine her capacity to love her baby and undermine her baby's capacity to have full activation of its brain and to experience human love throughout its life. And you're going to undermine that family's capacity to stay together over the long run. Pitocin is nasty stuff.
Is Pitocin the same substance that they use to use around the same time they do an epidural, or are those two different things?
Well, what's going to happen with the Pitocin is that, let me explain so that everybody understands. Okay. Pitocin is going to bring on contractions that are extremely powerful, unlike natural contractions, which come, they peak for about 20 seconds of intensity, and then the mother's body rests before the next contraction. With Pitocin, there is no rest. The contractions are going to be rolling through one after another, extremely intense contractions that are going to be smashing the baby, causing distress in the baby. So if you are induced, you have a 75% chance of ending up with a C-section because the baby is going to end up distressed, and they know this. And doctors are out there giving orders, something called pit to distress, which means give the mother an overdose of Pitocin right now so that we can deliberately distress the baby and move more quickly to a C-section.
Do you think this is why a lot of babies are breached?
No.
No? Okay.
No. Breech babies are another thing.
Okay.
But let me finish with the epidural. Okay. Yeah. So when the contractions are so intense and your uterus has been turned into a trash compactor instead of a birth canal, okay, the mother is going to be freaking out with the intensity, and so is the baby. Okay, so the mother is now going to be begging for the epidural. Uh-oh. I need the pain relief. I can't take it. Of course she can't take it because the birth process is totally unnatural and is extremely painful because the contractions are completely unnatural.
Right.
So now the epidural is as anesthesia.
I see.
The epidural they're going to inject this anesthesia into the mother's spine. Mm-hmm. That's intended to, numb her body from the waist down. And there's a lot going on with this. People are going to be signing their epidural consent form as if they know what the consequences of this epidural really are, right, which they don't. Okay, the epidural is going to make the mother unable to move. Okay, she's not going to be able to squat or to get on all fours or to spiral. Spiraling is really important when you're in labor, to open up your pelvis, to get your body rolling and make the space for your baby to come through. Okay. Right, lifting one leg up on the bed. All of these things are important movements for the mother to help her baby get born. But now she's got the epidural, and she can't move. Mm-hmm. She can't even roll over without somebody helping her roll over, which means her baby has been completely abandoned during this birth process. And now the baby's going to have to get birthed all by itself while the mother is laying down. And as soon as the mother lays down, her pelvis narrows, the blood supply to the baby is diminished. Mm-hmm. Making it extremely difficult for the baby to get through the birth canal. Plus, the baby is being bombarded with Pitocin contractions and a thing that's stuck in its skull. And these people will have done something called amniotomy, which means breaking the water. Right? There's a beautiful watery sac that the baby lives in while it's in the womb. Right. And sometimes that baby comes out, in a natural birth, the baby comes out with that sac still around it, intact. That sac of water is very protective from the intensity of contractions. It provides a padding for the baby. Oh, okay. Right? And now it's been broken. So the baby has no protection from the intensity of contractions, is experiencing absurdly, ridiculously intense contractions because of the Pitocin, has a screw in its head, and the mother's laying down without helping the baby.
Yeah, and not to mention, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with the epidural, right?
Yes. I tend to talk about things from the perspective of the baby because I really want... Mothers are so self-absorbed in this culture. They're always thinking about their own experience, and there's doulas who are trained, to be present with the parents emotionally during the birth process. But the doulas are trained to be present for what the mother wants during the birth. Mm-hmm. There's no baby doulas out there, right, protecting the baby from the mother. You got to protect the babies from the mother's choices.
Right.
Seriously.
Yeah,
and from the father's choices. So that's why I talk about things from the baby's perspective.
I like that a lot. It reminds me, I read a book a long time ago called A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, and it was a great book, but it was telling history from the losers of wars because, it gives the other side, because history is always written by the winners of wars, So what you're talking about here reminds me of that, where no one really is talking about the baby's perspective and, protecting the baby from the mother, and that's a unique approach. But Jeanice, we have to take a short break. I apologize. Okay. But we are with Jeanice Barcelo from birthofanewearth.com, and we'll be right back after this break. So recently we had a really, really great doctor and author on our show, Dr. Doris Rapp, and she was on episode number 56. And she talked about these really great Austin air purifiers and the necessity of having clean air in your house. And she was talking about how inside of our houses, the air is very, very toxic, and it's more toxic than even outside. And the reason is because there's chemicals that are off-gassing from our paints that are in our house, our chemicals, and our carpets, and the dust and the pollen and the mold and everything else that's inside the air of our house. And we don't get good ventilation. And so having some of these air purifiers are really, really critical. And I spoke with her at length off the air about why she likes these Austin air purifiers and why she promotes them. And it turns out that not only do they get rid of the pollens and the allergens and the dust and the particles and everything that's floating around in your air like most purifiers do, which is great, but they also get rid of, I think, 3,000 different chemicals that are inside. They're just floating around your house. And, these things end up in our lungs and in our bloodstream and all of that kind of stuff. And Doris Rapp has been researching this kind of information for many, many years. I think she's in her 80s now, so she really has a handle on which products are good and which products are not so good. And she recommends the Austin Air. And after talking with her, doing a ton of research on my own, and speaking with a company and looking into it from a lot of different angles, we agree with her. So if you're interested in a good quality air purifier, check it out. You can learn more at extremehealthradio.com/Austin, and you'll be redirected to a website that will sell these things. And they're really, really great machines, and I highly recommend them. If you have a baby, you want to have these things in their room or in the room where you sleep, or you can take them out and put them in your family room. So if you want to listen to that episode, extremehealthradio.com/56 to learn what she says about them, feel free, but we highly recommend them. So it's extremehealthradio.com/Austin, or you could check out our store and learn more about it on there as well. So thanks for listening, and let's get back to the show. Okay, we're with, again, Jeanice Barcelo of birthofanewearth.com, and this is heavy stuff, heavy stuff, but I think it's important, like I was saying before. So before the break, we were talking, Jeanice, about the pit to distress, the Pitocin, as well as the epidural. So I was just bringing up the fact of talking about history from the losers of war's perspective, and you were talking about the baby's perspective and protecting the baby from the mother.
Well, protecting the baby from the mother's choices, okay? It's not that the mother is out there going, I want to figure out a way to hurt my baby.
Right.
I don't know too many parents. I mean, the parents that are part of these cults, okay, they are doing that. They want to figure out how to hurt their baby.
Right.
But most parents do not, okay? But mothers are making choices that are harmful to their children. They're not consciously aware of that. If they were consciously aware of what circumcision, the long-term effects of circumcision, for example, most would choose not to. Mm-hmm. I mean, many would still go ahead and do it because they're completely insane. I'm afraid to say this, but these people are so far gone in the mind control that they'll circumcise their babies anyway, even after they've heard the information, because they believe in a demonic God who tells them that they have to. But that's a whole other story. So I don't want to say that we're protecting them from the mothers, but we are protecting them from the mother's ignorance and the mother's choices, and the father too. Right. Okay, because the father is going to be saying, I want my son circumcised, I want him to look like me. Idiotic things like that.
Yeah.
Okay? Really idiotic, really not well thought out, really not paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
So just passing on the trauma.
So this epidural, so the lady gets that, and so how long does it take for that stuff to wear off, and what are some of the other side effects that happen as a result of getting that shot?
See, epidural can actually cause lifelong problems. Some people end up paralyzed for life. I mean, it's very, very rare. Uh-huh. But an epidural has to be placed in the spine in this very particular spot. And if they miss by a very small space, that lady can be paralyzed, she can have a heart attack, women are dying from epidurals, and we know that babies are having long-term effects from, number one, being abandoned during the birth process. Physically, they're on their own, but they're also emotionally on their own, because the epidural means that the mother is basically completely concerned about her own experience with very little regard for what's going to happen to her baby.
Right.
Really, that's what signing an epidural consent form means. It means I care about my own pain, even if it means giving my baby more pain. That's what the epidural is going to do, okay? Something else about epidurals, okay? They're going to trick the mother's brain so the mother will not produce the natural opiates of birth. The opiates of birth are the chemicals that make the birth feel good, that make the birth possibly ecstatic, and for some women orgasmic, quite literally. In natural birth, women are having orgasms during labor because of these natural opiates of birth, which will not be produced if the epidural takes place. Those opiates are extremely important for your baby as well as for the mother, because the baby also needs to have some pain relief, right? Contractions are intense.
Right.
And they're going to be especially intense with Pitocin. But when the opiates are not there, that means baby's going to be experiencing a lot of pain, even if mother doesn't have any. Baby's going to have more, because there's no opiates. Pitocin's involved. The water's been broken. There's a thing stuck in the baby's head. Right? This is intense. This is absurd. It's outrageous. It's crimes against humanity.
Yeah.
Over and over and over, and there's more. You know, this is not the end of the protocols.
Yeah.
You know, we're just getting started with some of these protocols.
Yeah, we're just now only at the epidural, and there's we're 10% into it here.
You know, and the epidural is also going to make it much more likely that the mother's going to have an episiotomy. Episiotomy is also a form of sexual violence, of torture, which means that they're going to come in and they're going to say, oh, you know, your pelvis is too small. Well, that's because you're laying down, Mom. Yeah. Your pelvis is too small, we're going to have to cut you to make room for your baby's head to come out. And I'm going to tell you that episiotomies are very hard to heal. They're painful. Some women can't have sex for the rest of their life without experiencing pain. Some can't even pee without experiencing pain for the rest of their lives because of the episiotomy. Everything, you know, in this mechanical world says, okay, the mother could tear, all right? Some women tear when they give birth, and a natural tear will heal very quickly, generally. Right. Okay? But episiotomies do not. These straight cuts, you don't find them in nature. Yeah, and the scars that are happening with those things are blocking the energy fields and things like that of the body, right? The scars are more than just physical. Yeah, these are long-term psychological scars. We have a doctor that was on our show, Dr. Bob Marshall, and he talks about healing episiotomies with clay packs and restoring the energy flows that those things produce in the body. But man, but nobody knows this stuff. That's the thing, is it's not really taught anywhere, because everything that's taught about hospital births is done by people that believe the hospital births are, in fact, the right way to go, right? That's right. When you're going to go for childbirth education classes, you're going to be learning about all the things that the hospital does. You're going to be prepared in a form of mind control to prepare yourself for this kind of abuse. Yeah. That's what childbirth education is in this country. So, you know, it's not conversations like the ones that we're having. No, typically not, you know. Yeah. Most people don't even want to know this. You know, people are afraid to know the truth. They're afraid to look this demon in the face, and it is dark. It is big time dark. And I was reading recently that I think if you elect to go to a hospital, your chances of C-section are, I think, 1 in 3. Is 1 in 4 or 1 in 3, which is amazing. It's 1 in 3 in most places, and in some hospitals, several, it's 1 in 2. Wow. Some hospitals have a higher than 50% C-section rate. Some hospitals, like in Brazil, have a 90% C-section rate. Really? Okay, now C-sections, you're cutting through 7 energetic pathways of the body with a C-section. You're slicing into 7 meridian centers. You want to talk about, you know, being energetically messed up. C-section is a fundamental component of disassociation too. See, with C-section, with all of the things that I'm talking about today, it's going to be very hard for the mother to bond with her baby, because with all of these drugs that are given to the mother, the natural hormones of birth are not going to occur. Plus, the mother's going to be in extreme pain. Half the time, she's going to be out of it completely, cannot make eye contact with her baby, is not going to be making skin-to-skin contact. This is another fundamental means by which the neurobiology of love activates. So if mom is out of it, dad needs to get his shirt off, get his baby, put that baby on his skin, skin to skin. Look in baby's eyes, right? Let the baby smell you, you smell your baby. Very, very important. The sense of smell, the sense of sight, the sense of touch. Let the baby hear the heartbeat. Okay, all of these things are forms of primal bonding by which the neurobiology of love will activate. You know, birth should be ecstatic. It should be the culmination, the fulfillment of human love. It's a primary, extremely important event in the life of a family. And it's so powerful that it can hold that family together forever, or it can break that family apart.
Now, what would you say to women who are out there who are naturally minded and they're inclined to do things and they really want to do things the right way and have a home birth and things like that, but, you know, they've been programmed just like we all have our whole life, and so they have this extreme level of fear around it, and they think, you know what, maybe I will go to a birthing center that's close to a hospital, and then if I have to go to a hospital, you know, I'll do that, you know, as a backup. What kinds of things do you have to say to women who kind of share our same ideas, but they're scared as well, you know?
I would say that if you're going to try a home birth, it's very important to prepare yourself for home birth. You know, home birth should not be attempted without serious preparation, including an analysis and review of your own birth and whatever work that you have to do prior, ideally prior to conception, to get the trauma out of your own body, because this goes for fathers too. If the trauma is still lodged in the system somatically, what happens with trauma is that we recreate it. We're always, you know, the system is always trying to, find that happy ending, okay, and return itself to love. But unfortunately, when trauma recapitulates, when we recreate the circumstances of our own birth in an effort to heal it, very often we don't heal it. Very often we compound the trauma. So it's just easier to get the trauma out of the system.
How do you do that?
Well, that's part of the work that I do. There's a system of Japanese energy medicine called Jinshin, Jinshin. It's very powerful for getting the trauma out of the nervous system so that it doesn't repeat itself. There's emotional freedom technique, which is working very powerfully for some people. There's a cranial sacral therapy, which is also very powerful, very subtle. These are very subtle energy medicine techniques that will not, over-activate the system. There's also Watsu therapy. If you've had trauma in the womb, if you were not wanted, or your conception was based on lust or whatever, Watsu therapy is very, very powerful in the water.
How do you spell that? W-A-T-S-U?
Yes, Watsu.
Okay.
So Watsu's really powerful, really gentle, and many Watsu therapists have been trained to work with prenatal trauma and with birth trauma. So you want to make sure that you're getting a therapist who's been trained to work with prenatal and birth trauma. And I just want to give people a little bit of a warning about things like rebirthing, because rebirthing is also very popular as a means of healing birth trauma. But what I've found with rebirthing is that it can be very re-traumatizing, in the sense that when you go into a rebirth session and you're doing this breath work, the memories from your birth can come flooding, like the gates kind of open between the reptilian brain and the higher parts of the brain, and all of a sudden your conscious mind gets all this information about your birth, which can cause an extremely high level of adrenaline and stress in the system. So if you don't have a way to calm yourself down after a rebirthing session, like you can learn how to do Jinshin, for example, on yourself. Do self-care every day. And then if you go do a rebirthing session, you have Jinshin as a tool to calm your nervous system down and to help your nervous system sequence these memories through and out. That's what you want. You want tools that will help the nervous system sequence the trauma, through because it got stuck. It was so overwhelming. You couldn't process it at the time. Okay, it got stuck. So you want to find a way to move it through and get it out.
So those are some of the energetic things people can do to help move that birth trauma out. And then, so
there's one more thing that I learned about yesterday that I'm going to put a page up on my website about, called the Epigenie, which is what's it called? Oh, I forgot. This is a new technology that they have that's also getting the nervous system, getting the trauma out of the nervous system, and helping the brain reorganize itself so that the dormant parts of our brain can activate. Oh, the pain genie. So if you bring a pain genie with you to your labor, for example, and you walk in and you get all afraid, if you use the pain genie, your whole system will calm down.
Now, what is that? Is that a physical thing, or what is that?
It's a physical thing. It's a physical thing. It's kind of, they're using TENS machines right now, all these technological objects to help people with pain. I think the pain genie is several levels energetically above the TENS machine.
How do you spell that, TENS machine?
TENS.
TENS. Okay. Wow. Golly,
so there are things, that are energetically very, very supportive and helpful. And I recommend, parents who were born in hospitals, who were circumcised, C-sectioned, induced, all these things that we're talking about. Haven't even talked about the umbilical cord, and we really need to say something about that. Yeah. All of these things are critically important to heal so that we don't repeat it and have our children experience something similar or worse.
Right. And before we get to the umbilical cord, I just want to say, too, that I think that, developing an inner strength and an inner calm prior to birth and prior to conception, and turning off that TV and stop watching these depictions of hospital births, I think, extracting ourselves as a culture from all of that and start working on yourself, I think that's part of what you're just talking about, right?
You have to do the personal work. And, of course, there's beautiful videos of natural birth that pregnant families should watch so that they can get visual images of what is possible. I recommend the best film out there is called Birth as We Know It. Okay. And if you go to the website birthasweknowit.com, you can buy the film right there. It's the most important birth film available. It's the most exquisite footage of natural birth that I have ever seen, and I really highly recommend it. There's another film called Orgasmic Birth, and I want to caution people that if you're focused on orgasm, on a hedonistic pleasure for the mother, then you are taking the wrong approach to birth. Birth is about love. It's not about fleshy indulgence and having orgasms.
Right.
So even though there's a film called Orgasmic Birth, and it has also some really good footage of natural birth, don't let yourself get fooled into focusing on orgasm as a drive, during your birth process, because birth is about love.
And where would someone get that?
Orgasmicbirth.com.
Okay. And that's really the same thing, like you were just saying, with women being focused on that. I mean, that's just the other side of the pendulum. It's still
a very dark side.
It's still focusing on the mother. Yeah.
It's demonic. When you're focused on sexual pleasure, okay, even during conception, which is 95% of us are conceived as a side effect of our parents getting off on each other. Mm-hmm. Right? There's very few parents who are conscious enough to bring their bodies together, not because they want to have a physically satisfying experience, but because they want to create life.
Right.
Right? There's a whole different energy there. And you see all of us that are conceived as a side effect of fleshy indulgence, it reflects in our culture, because now we have a severely dysfunctional pornographic culture. Mm-hmm. Fathers are addicted to pornography. They're having sex with pictures in their mind instead of their partners. Mm-hmm. And they're having a harder and harder time getting off, because the more that you reduce it to that vulgar physical level without including any sense of the divine in terms of creating life, God, the real creator, is all about life.
Right.
Even if we put pavement and poison all over everything, in the cracks between the pavement, life comes. Because God is about life, the regeneration of life, right, and the regeneration of beauty, and giving us everything that we need.
So sorry, I kind of sidetracked you there. You were going to talk about the placenta and a little bit about the cord and all that.
There's so much I could say about. Let me say that briefly with the cutting of the umbilical cord, what hospitals are doing is harnessing the baby's cord blood and selling it. Okay. They're selling the cord blood. They're selling the foreskins. This is quite literal. Foreskins are ending up in cosmetics, okay, and the baby's cord blood, even though they're going to tell you bank your baby's cord blood, bank your baby's cord blood, your baby needs its cord blood, it needs the stem cells when it's born. That's why the umbilical blood is there when it's born. When your baby's born, okay, that umbilical cord is going to be pulsing, filled with blood. All right, that's 1/3 of your baby's blood supply that's coming from the placenta through the cord into your baby. If you cut off your baby's blood supply, you're cutting off your baby's oxygen. Your baby's not breathing when it's born. It's not breathing when it's in the womb. It's receiving all of the oxygen it needs through the blood that's pumping through the placenta and the umbilical cord to the baby. So you cut off the baby's oxygen supply. You force the baby to gasp in desperation for its life. All right, when you cut off the oxygen supply. The umbilical blood also contains nutrients for the proper activation of the nervous system and the brain and the lungs. Okay, it contains nutrients for the proper activation of the immune system. It contains stem cells. It is critically important for your baby to receive all of its cord blood. And so if that cord has not stopped pulsing, if that cord is not white, that means there's still blood going to your baby, and it needs to be left alone until your baby has received all of it. Some people are doing what's called a lotus birth, which means they don't cut the cord at all. Right, the cord stays attached to the baby and the placenta, and it falls off on its own 3, 5, 7 days later, whenever. Yeah. Okay, it's a lot of work to do a lotus birth because you have to carry your baby and the placenta around, and you have to have proper herbs to address the placenta. But the baby's relationship with the placenta is extremely important. In indigenous cultures, They view the placenta as like a guardian angel for the baby. The placenta will literally break down its own body in order to feed the baby if the baby's not receiving enough nourishment. If the baby is malnourished at all, the placenta will break itself down to feed the baby. The placenta during a lotus birth, 5 days after the baby is born, when the baby nurses, the placenta pulses.
Wow.
It's still alive, and it's still very much responding to the needs of the baby being met. And so the baby has a very deep spiritual relationship with its placenta. And fathers in Bali have extremely strict protocols that they have to follow to protect their baby's placenta, because they understand if the wrong people get their hands on the placenta of their baby, that their baby can be infiltrated by dark forces throughout its life. And I'm going to tell you, and this is the hardest part for people to hear, that there are entities who are trying to steal the life force of our children by harnessing their placenta and their cord blood. And in some very dark rituals, they are consuming the blood and the body parts of infants. And for those Christians out there who, are horrified by what I just said, I want to remind the Christians that they're going to church every week, right? And eating symbolically the body and drinking the blood of a sacrificed human being. And these are satanic rituals. These are very, very dark rituals that people believe that they will gain spiritual power and by ingesting the life force of other human beings.
Yeah, and the placenta is almost like a second heartbeat, isn't it, really?
It's a very, very deep spiritual connection between that baby and the placenta. It belongs to the baby. Mothers are consuming their baby's placenta. They're eating their baby's life force. They don't think that, they think it's theirs. But the placenta doesn't belong to the mother. It belongs to the baby. So
I suspect that with the baby and the placenta, you're really setting up the baby's immune system, because you're talking about stem cells and nutrients that it would otherwise never get if that cord were cut. And you're really like imprinting, like a hard drive on a computer, a brand new operating system from the placenta, giving everything the baby needs for life and to prevent cancer when it's, 70 years old and all that, right?
Exactly. And it's also, babies are aware that there's dark forces that are harnessing their life force. I'm very sure that I was aware when I was coming in of what they were doing. There's no doubt about it that babies know. Babies are very conscious when they're coming in.
The problem is that we treat them like they're just a mass of flesh, and we don't understand they're fully human, they're fully there. They just happen to be trapped in a small body, right?
I wouldn't say that they're trapped, but yes, they are in a small body, and they are, everybody wants to be around babies because they're still connected to the energy of human love. You could feel it with babies who haven't been deeply traumatized. There's so much love emanating from a baby because they're still connected to source consciousness, and it's still moving through them. So all of us who've been separated from us are desperate to attach to it, so everybody wants to get their hands on the babies. But we can, and we are disrupting their capacity.
Right.
By doing what we're doing.
And then after that, the baby's taken off. If you have a lotus birth, they can't take the baby, right?
Well, you're not going to be able to have a lotus birth if you go to a hospital. They're going to run you through the ringer to even go home with your baby's placenta because they're making money off of this stuff.
Yeah.
And besides which, they're supplying the dark forces for their rituals. There's no doubt in my mind. This is what's going on. There's a website. If you doubt what I'm saying, go to a website called infants-blood.info. There's a website where they're selling infant blood.
Infants-blood.info.
Yeah, you're going to be horrified.
Wow. I don't know if I want to go there and see that.
You probably don't want to go there, but I just want to let you know it's out there.
Yeah.
People are ingesting infants' blood, and they think that, they're bathing in it. They think it's really good for them. It's disgusting. It's evil. It's horrifying. It's beyond the concept of most people to even imagine.
Yeah, what's interesting too is when they do the cutting of the umbilical cord, the fathers have no idea what's going on, and it's almost like, I don't know what it is. It just feels weird when the father cuts the umbilical cord, and it's everyone's happy.
The father is becoming part of the cult. You see, he's becoming part of the satanic cult by doing this to his baby. Doctors are saying, here, you cut your baby's umbilical cord.
So what would
happen? Very dark.
So what would happen in a hospital if you wanted to do a lotus birth? What would they do to you? Would they just say no? You can't do that, or?
Probably. What you want to do if you're going to go to a hospital, number one, before you choose a hospital, find out what their policy is regarding bringing your baby's placenta home. Get your baby's placenta and do not let them cut the cord for at least 3 minutes.
Okay.
Okay? If you can stop them from cutting the cord for the first hour or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, that's ideal.
Okay.
But in a hospital, you're lucky if you can get a couple of minutes before they cut the cord so that your baby can get the majority of its cord. But you want to find out what their policy is, get whatever paperwork you need to get your baby's placenta out of there. This all needs to be done pre-birth.
Okay.
Okay, and tell them, write up your birth plan, choose a midwife instead of an OB.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, write up your birth plan that you don't want the cord cut, you want delayed cord clamping. And what is their policy on delayed cord clamping? How long are they going to let you go?
So you would write that out and bring it to the hospital with you, or send it beforehand?
You want to do all of this beforehand.
Okay.
Yes, you want to write it out, even though there's a lot of bitter nurses out there who are going to laugh if you bring a birth plan. They're going to want to undermine it. There's a lot of darkness in hospitals, so you can see nurses' blogs about some of them being ordered, number one, to pit to distress. They write about that the doctor ordered them to do it. But they also write about what a joke it is when a mother walks in with a birth plan.
Uh-huh. Okay, so the women will set all this up prior to going to the hospital.
Set up your vaccine situation. Look at what's going on in your state. If a vaccine exemption is required, what are the possibilities for vaccine exemptions? You need to have all of this paperwork before you get there. Because if you get there without this paperwork and you say, I don't want you to vaccinate my baby, they're going to say, I'm calling CPS because you're a bad parent. You got to do your homework before you get to a hospital or a birth center.
Okay, so you would put this just like in a Word doc and just make it up kind of and just write it all out?
No, there's actually forms. I mean, you want to do a birth plan with the support of your care provider.
Okay.
So your midwife will help you with the birth plan. She'll ask you specific questions, or if you hire a doula, which I highly recommend you do, hire a doula and have the doula work with you with your birth plan.
What's
okay? They'll work.
I'm sorry, real quick, what's the difference between a doula and a midwife, really quick?
A midwife is medical support. A doula is emotional support. A doula will be with you from the minute you call her that you think you're in labor. She'll come over, be at your house if you want her to, meet you at the hospital, whatever you want.
Okay.
She'll be with you the whole time. A midwife or an OB are going to be popping in and out during your birth and are the medical end of your birth.
Okay.
So the doula is there for total emotional support. Very important for fathers, because fathers really do better when there's a doula present, because it takes a lot of the pressure off of them, because they know somebody's there who knows what's going on and can support them through the process too.
Okay.
So you don't want to choose a doula who's going to override the father.
Okay.
Or take over the father's role. Fathers, you don't want somebody standing in front of your wife's vagina catching your baby. That's your job. It's your baby.
Right.
You want to look in your baby's eyes. You want to bring your baby skin to skin, or put the baby right on your wife's body and look in your baby's eyes on your wife's body. You want to be front and center at the birth of your child. Don't let a doctor step in there. Get them away from your baby. That's my advice to fathers. Don't let them usurp the father's role. Okay,
so are there any other things that women should do if they choose to do the hospital route, just to offset some of the damage that's going to be caused there?
Yes, the vitamin K thing, you want to do your homework on vitamin K, bring it with you. Print out all the documents that talk about the dangers of the vitamin K shot. Then the doctors are going to say to you, all right, we'll do the oral vitamin K. All right, you say, I'm going to wait. I'm going to do the vitamin K at home. Do your research. You got to do your homework and bring it with you and show them you know what you're talking about. And the same thing with vaccines. You have to get the exemption. It's a form that you have to get, and it varies from state to state. Right? Some states will allow you only a medical exemption. Some states will allow you a religious exemption. Some will allow you a philosophical exemption. You have to do the research in your state. There's a great website, NVIC.org, the National Vaccine Something Center, NVIC.org, where you can learn about the exemptions in your state and what you need to do. And you can do all your research just on that one site alone.
Okay. Oh, good.
About what's going on with the vaccines. It's a fabulous website. So the vitamin K shot you don't want the gunk in the baby's eyes. You have to find out what's the hospital protocol with the gunk in your baby's eyes. Can you say no to it? I don't know. It may be mandatory. You just don't know what's going on in your state until you find out what's going on in your state. Okay, so those are the main things. Also, swaddling. Okay, do not let them swaddle your baby. Swaddling means they're going to wrap your baby so tight that the baby's going to be mummified. It can't move. And babies go into parasympathetic shock when they're swaddled, because their interpretation of why this is happening is that there must be a very bad threat. And that's why they're not allowed to cry. That's why they're being swaddled, to prevent them from crying. Okay? And to prevent them from making skin-to-skin contact. So when you hand a baby who has poison gunk in his eyes, had his umbilical cord cut, had been shot up with all kinds of toxic neurochemicals, wrapped in a blanket that smells like chemicals, right? The mother can't smell her baby. And in nature, there are species that will reject their young if the scent is off. So we know this is deliberate to undermine the possibility for bonding. Everything that I've just told you about is deliberate to undermine bonding, to undermine the capacity for human love, and to break down families. Because if this happens to you and your family, it's going to undermine the capacity of that family to stay together.
So now we've kind of laid out, the plan for these types of things, and I want to talk just the last few minutes of the show here about some of the things that people can do. Like my wife and I right now are doing lots and lots of cleansing prior to conception and all of that kind of stuff. What are some things that people can do to really take a proactive approach to having a healthy baby?
Well, let me say, I want to talk about spiritual things that you can do right now.
Okay.
Number one is, if you have your own property, your own land, or even if you don't, put it in a pot. Plant a family tree. Okay? Plant a seed if you don't have your own property, or plant a little tree if you do. Okay? And this tree is a symbolic of uniting your family. And think about your future with your child. Think about a happy life with your child. Think about the spiritual awareness of your child. Think about, visualize your child having a happy life in its time with you, in the beautiful space that you create for your child. And with your child's placenta, bury it by this tree, okay? In this place on your property, with this tree that you've planted for your family, where your baby's placenta is buried, is going to be a very powerful place for your baby as your baby becomes an adult to return to in order to regenerate itself and recharge itself and communicate with the divine mind. So ideally, we have our own land. Most of us don't, many of us don't, and that's a real issue. But if you do, this is a beautiful thing that you can do for your child. We haven't gone into the information about conception and about prenatal life and all the things that we can do to support our baby and coming in the best way. But once you're pregnant, it's kind of too late. But ideally, you want to conceive a baby consciously, not haphazardly, and not as a side effect of your fleshy gratification. Fathers, it's very important, how you think about the woman that you're having sex with and how you're thinking about the sex that you're having. That information's going to be in your sperm. And so if you're having sex with a woman and visualizing some pornographic object in your mind, right, that's going to become your child, right? That information is in your child, will become your child, and will undermine your child's ability to understand human love, because it was conceived in such a, what's the word I'm looking for, vulgar and incorrect, Yeah. Mothers, if you want to avoid having pain in childbirth, then don't give in to men based on fleshy gratification. All right, pain in childbirth is a direct result of the erroneous psychological approach to the birth process and to the creation of life. And so if you've conceived your baby accidentally, you don't want to have a baby, right? You're thinking about abortion while you're pregnant. You're not going to be able to give birth easily because you haven't wanted this child. It is not easy to give birth to an unwanted child.
Because it's not really natural to be, is it to be in labor for 24 hours like some women are? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's natural.
I wouldn't say, births can go 24 hours, and a lot of when it gets held up is because the mother's in a process and she doesn't know consciously what's scaring her. She could be processing her own birth. She could be processing some fear about the relationship she's in. She could be processing some fear about the environment she's in. That needs to be addressed in labor. So if you have a really conscious doula who understands birth trauma, which is not very common, or a midwife, they can help the mother process through what is going on emotionally that's holding up the birth process. This mother may not want the baby. She may not want to give birth to a baby. She may not want to be a mother, right? She may not be in a good relationship. There could be all kinds of things going on. And so these are the things before we get pregnant that we want to sort out. We want to make sure that we're in a loving relationship with a partner who we feel safe with,
right,
who we can trust. Safety is huge. If we're with a partner that is a womanizer, that's, looking around at other women all the time, we're never going to feel safe. With a partner who cheats, there can't be safety there, all right? There can't be a good birth process there. Half the mothers are not going to even want their partners around because they don't trust them. Right? That's going to undermine your child. It's going to negatively influence your child's ability to understand human love and to experience human love, authentic human love. We're making huge mistakes in our culture right now because men are trained to look at women as sexual objects. This is a very deep subject, and it's a whole entire show,
right,
how we're conditioning men. And women are trained to show up as sexual objects. Right, so we're dressing ourselves all erotically and luring men in with the charms of our body and the promise of a pleasing, satisfying sexual experience. But the ones that come toward a woman who's dressed as a sex object are not going to be the same as the one that can meet her in the heart.
Right.
But then we're making babies with women that look good, you see? And we don't love them. They're not even, they don't even have the same morals that we do.
Yeah, it's completely backward.
It's completely damaging.
And I think it's really, really important to do the work on yourself and in your relationship prior to conception, just like what you're talking about. But just really, really get into it and work hard at bringing forth the healthiest baby you can.
Yeah, and you want to be in a relationship where you share common goals and common visions, where you've chosen a child, that's not just a reproduction of yourselves with your trauma and your pain, but a child that can contribute to the fulfillment of love on earth. So you want to pick a being out of all the beings who are waiting to incarnate that's very special, that will fulfill the divine plan on planet Earth. You want to co-create life with God. That's the ideal scenario, that we're really conscious when we're conceiving of the kind of child we want to bring forth. During gestation, we're visualizing this child having a happy life, and we're, fathers especially, compiling a program, a spiritual program for the child. It's like the father is giving birth to the spiritual self. Fathers have a very important role to play. The mother gives birth to the physical. The fathers are almost more important. Okay, and this is not talked about in our culture. Mothers are giving birth to the physical body. Right? Fathers have a role to give birth to the second spiritual self of that baby. They have a very important role to play. So you don't want to be bringing them up believing in a God that requires circumcision. Fathers need to break free of the occult influences on their psyche. No TV, right? Break free of religious lies.
Yeah, it's really, really deep and really, really...
very, very deep.
Really, really deep. So, Jeanice, we've
got
read
one more thing I want to say. Read the Anastasia books. Go to ringingcedars.com. Ringing, as in a bell. Cedars, as in the tree. Ringingcedars.com. Buy the books. Read the books. Prepare yourself. These books are the most important books I've ever read in terms of understanding how to give birth to a fully conscious human being.
Very
it's so beautiful.
Very, very fascinating. So, Jeanice, are you working on anything in the future? We're just going to wrap up the show here, but have you got any projects you're working on? Or
I've got a teacher training coming up in April for people that want to go deep into this information, that want to heal their birth trauma, that want to prepare themselves and their bodies, their body, mind, and psyche to give birth to a child, or that want to heal their birth trauma, or that want to become teachers of the curriculum that I've created, that want to contribute to getting this information out to the public. Please go to my website, birthofanewearth.com. I've got my weekly radio show on Revolution Radio happening every Friday from 2 to 4.
Okay.
And that's all that's coming into my mind right now.
Okay. Golly. Yeah. Well, this is great information. And I will have all of the websites that you mentioned on the show on the show page, which is extremehealthradio.com/62 for people that are interested in that, as well as a link to your website, birthofanewearth.com. Do you do any...
Let me also invite you to check out the templateorg.com, another very important body of work for people that are going to make babies. And that want to return their system to the original blueprint.
That's called the Template Org?
The templateorg.com.
Org.com. Okay, I will put that on the page as well.
And my blog is birthofanewearth.blogspot.com.
Oh, okay. We'll put that on there as well. This is great. So do you work with people if people wanted to contact you via phone or anything, or no?
I do work with people. I often work with people through Skype who want to get ready for birth and who want to process through some of their birth trauma. You can reach me through email at JaniceBarcelo@yahoo.com. I don't like to give my phone number out over the air. So it's JaniceBarcelo@yahoo.com, or you can go to my website and contact me through my website at birthofanewearth.com.
Oh, excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much for being on our show today, and it was a lot of fun. Really, really a lot of fun.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you for having me and embracing this information. Very grateful.
You're welcome. Would you mind holding on as I close out the show?
Sure.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. That was an awesome show. Very, very deep, very, very powerful show. Probably one of our most powerful shows we've done, I believe. So visit her website, birthofanewearth.com. And if you would like to donate to our efforts, we would greatly, greatly appreciate that. We are 100% listener supported, and I want to thank those of you who have donated recently. Very, very appreciative of that. And we want to make sure that our website and shows and all of this content stays free. So please, if you can, donate. You can donate as little as $1 or $2. That would be great. And I want to thank Mike Adams of naturalnewsradio.com as well. Thank you to him. And we also have a mailing list if you want to join. We've got lots of subscribers on there. We send out about once a week. And you can also follow us on Facebook and send our link to your friends. Send this link to your friends if you know anyone who is interested in this type of information. And then we also have a store on our website as well with over 75 products. Great, great stuff like rebounders. We have blenders and dehydrators and all kinds